look at the devastation left in Hurricane Irma's wake. The sun returned to parts of Florida Monday, revealing the devastation left by Hurricane Irma. Downgraded to a tropical storm, Irma moved north into Georgia. It is blamed for at least 2 deaths there and at least 5 in Florida. Nearly 7 million homes and businesses were without electricity Monday, according to the Florida Division of Emergency Management, and the White House said it could take weeks before it is all restored. Estimates of the Florida damage covered by insurance range from $20 to $40 billion. Here is a look at some areas in the state that faced Irma's wrath. Key Largo. One of the hardest hit places was the Florida Keys, the chain of low-lying islands off the southern tip of the Sunshine State. Officials said there is no electricity, no running water and no working sewage system in parts south of Key Largo, CBS News' Elaine Quijano reports. On Monday, an aerial view of devastation, the splintered homes and wind-tossed boats, was only matched by the scene on the ground. In the lower Key areas, just 10 miles east of Irma's landfall, the brute force of 130 miles per hour winds and nearly 15 feet of storm surge easily destroyed oceanside homes in Marathon and in Big Pine Key. Some homes were still smoldering from a fire that burned them to the ground. Residents like Mike, a Marine Reserve who was helping Houston recover from Harvey's floods, came back to find destruction at his home. "I got the walls up, going to have to rebuild it," he told Quijano. "But hey, you live by the ocean. You got to take chances." The National Guard was conducting a door-to-door search for survivors in the hardest-hit areas. Residents who left are blocked from returning, and a dusk-to-dawn curfew is in effect. Relief missions were also organizing, tasked to identify any possible victims. Road crews went mile by mile trying to evaluate the roads and bridges. So far, half of the 42 bridges have been deemed safe. But the Department of Defense warned that with no power or water, the 10,000 people who stayed may be forced to evacuate. Those who stayed, like Hire Concrete, ventured out to find loved ones. "When we were walking out, a neighbor about a block up, he survived," Concrete told CBS News. "We talked to him on our way out." Florida Gov. Rick Scott took an aerial view of the damage and said recovery is a long way away. "My heart goes out to the people in the Keys," Scott said. "There's devastation and I just hope everybody survived. It's horrible what I saw." The USS Lincoln is sitting off the coast of Key West and 2 more should arrive Tuesday full of medical and relief supplies. Jacksonville, Florida, was seeing the worst flooding in nearly a century. CBS News correspondent Jerrica Duncan reports. Downtown Jacksonville was walloped by floodwater Monday, and park monuments were swallowed because of record-breaking storm surge barreling in from St. Johns River. Duncan said that much of the city was without power, and that security alarms were blaring mid-afternoon. Officials said the situation is expected to get worse before it improves because of high tide. Mayor Lenny Curry said people most at risk were told to leave Wednesday. However, more than 100 people were rescued from their homes Monday, in a 2-hour period. In St. Johns County, southeast of Jacksonville, several properties could not withstand the over 80 miles per hour wind gusts. Downed trees and power lines were also putting people like Donna Mount in danger. Mount told Duncan that a tree fell early Monday morning. She described hearing a loud bang and couldn't believe the damage. Meanwhile, officials warned residents in Jacksonville that floodwaters will rise and fall gradually, and urged them to take caution over the next several days. Naples. On Florida's Gulf Coast, Naples took a real hard hit, according to Mayor Bill Barnett. CBS News' Jonathan Vigliotti reports that Hurricane Irma turned the area into a sea of destruction, plunging some neighborhoods underwater after dropping nearly a foot of rain. Some areas were flooded by 6 feet of storm surge, although that was far less than the 12 to 18 feet that was predicted. The winds, gusting to more than 140 miles per hour, were so punishing that a gas station was twisted into a pile of metal. Bob Utter, who spoke with Vigliotti, said his neighborhood took a beating. "We're quite amazed at all the major trees that are down," Utter said. "We've been through a couple of hurricanes before, but nothing like this experience." Almost all of Collier County's 300,000 residents were without power Monday evening. Downed trees and power lines barricaded streets and posed a threat to homeowners anxious to see what's left. On Marco Island, cleanup has begun, but lack of electricity and water slowed the process. Farther east, the farming community of Immokalee, America's tomato capital, has turned into a flood zone. Many residents there, like Deborah Estrada, are migrant farmers who feel they've been left on their own. "Nobody is out here trying to help," Estrada said. "Water, anything, you know. They don't know if we need anything. Nobody is out here trying to help." Most of Collier County has dried out. But just north, in Bonita Springs, that wasn't the case by Monday evening. Vigliotti said it was one of many neighborhoods under several feet of water and cut off by downed trees. It could take days for the water to recede. Miami. Although Miami was nearly 100 miles from where Irma's eye made landfall, it, too, was damaged. CBS News' Mark Strassman reports that across the city, Irma's power twisted street after street into debris fields, a landscape of mangled trees and downed power lines. The storm's 100-mile-per-hour gusts battered Miami. Dozens of boats sank, washed ashore, or were missing. Up to 5 feet of storm surge pushed onto Brickell Avenue, a downtown boulevard of high-rise condos and banks. And while Brickell was drained Monday, it was still a mess. Almost 900,000 Miami-Dade homes and businesses were without power, Strassman reported. While Irma wasn't a direct hit in Miami, its glancing blow packed a wallop. Mateo Patras, who manages the News Cafe, began to clean up the South Beach landmark after Irma. "It could have been way more worse than what we have today. We're very lucky," Patras said. Ed Hudak is the police chief in Coral Gables, a city famed for its Mediterranean Revival-style architecture. 85% of homes and business have no power, Strassman reported. "We were concerned about what it was going to be," Hudak told Strassman. "We really didn't know what to expect." Chief Hudak said the storm has passed, but not the danger. "Our biggest concern now in the recovery, and I don't think a lot of people realize, is more people get injured after the storm, where they're getting their houses back together when the power starts coming back on," Hudak said. Meanwhile, bands of heavy rain from Irma were lashing Georgia and South Carolina, which was also hit by a strong storm surge. The ocean tide reached nearly 10 feet, one of the highest on record. Downtown Charleston was flooded. The water was hip-deep in some spots and more flooding could be on the way overnight into Tuesday during high tide. Officials in Haiti confirmed the first death from Hurricane Irma on Monday, the 34th death in the Caribbean from the devastating storm. The victim, a male, died in the town of Mire-Balais in the Central Plateau region of the country, according to a civil protection report obtained by the Associated Press. The man, identified as Manus Andreval, died while crossing the swollen river, agency spokesman Guillaume Albert Molian told the AP. Evacuation and aid efforts are in full swing across much of the Caribbean, with France, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom already having boots on the ground. The U.S. government said it would send a flight to evacuate its citizens from St. Martin, one of the hardest-hit islands. On Monday, the AP reported. Evacuees were told to expect long lines and no running water when they arrived at the airport. A Royal Caribbean Cruise Line ship was expected to dock near the island to help with the aftermath, and a boat was reportedly bringing a 5-ton crane capable of unloading large shipping containers filled with relief assets, according to the AP. A French military ship was also expected to arrive Tuesday carrying materials to build temporary housing with. More than 1,200 American tourists were evacuated Saturday from St. Martin, the Dutch side of St. Martin, with the help of the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Defense Department. Evacuations began with those in need of urgent medical care, spokeswoman Heather Nauer told the AP. It is estimated that the island lost more than 70% of its buildings. In St. Thomas, the USS Wasp, an amphibious assault ship, was used to evacuate hospital patients from St. Thomas to St. Croix in Puerto Rico. The Miami-based Norwegian Cruise Line is using one of its ships as an ad hoc rescue boat to evacuate 2,000 tourists from the island, the AP reported. The ship is scheduled to arrive Tuesday to take the evacuees to Miami. All South Florida airports, Miami International, FT, Lauderdale International, and Palm Beach International, are closed through Monday, the Sun Sentinel reported. with the decision to reopen on Tuesday still pending. A total of 16 airports have ceased operations in Florida until further notice. In addition to impacting air travel, Irma has also proved challenging for cruise companies. Norwegian Cruise Line told Weather.com that as of Monday morning, 20 cruises were cancelled, 16 trips were shortened, and another 16 have altered itineraries because of the storm. They will continue to update their website with new information. The storm brought catastrophic damage that left parts of the Caribbean practically uninhabitable, as Barbuda and Antigua's Prime Minister Gaston Brown said in a statement. Cuba. At least 10 people died in Cuba in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma barreling through the island, the first Category 5 hurricane to make landfall in the island nation since 1924. Evacuations are still underway in the Caribbean, where more aid is arriving after the hurricane raked a destructive path through the continental United States. The majority of the victims in Cuba were killed by collapsing buildings, the BBC reported. Cuba's president, Raúl Castro, said recovering from the impact of the hurricane would be an immense task. Irma made landfall in northern Cuba Friday night as a Category 5 hurricane, ripping off roofs, collapsing buildings and flooding hundreds of miles of coastline. According to the AP, Cuban authorities warn of staggering damage to all-inclusive resorts and cities along the Keys on the northern coast, as well as farmlands in central Cuba. Ahead of the storm, more than 5,000 tourists were evacuated. Video footage from northern and eastern Cuba showed severe damage. According to witnesses, a provincial museum near the eye of the storm was in ruins, and authorities in the city of Santa Clara said 39 buildings have collapsed. Residents of the capital should know that the flooding is going to last more than 36 hours, in other words, it is going to persist, Civil Defense Colonel Luis Angel Macarino said late Saturday, noting that the seawater had penetrated some 2,000 feet into parts of Havana. According to records from the National Weather Service, Irma is the first Category 5 hurricane to make landfall on Cuba since October 1924. Barbuda and Antigua. The nation of Barbuda and Antigua breathed a sigh of relief Saturday after Hurricane Jose veered north of the islands, sparing the island of Barbuda that lost an estimated 95% of its buildings after Hurricane Irma blasted the island as a Category 5 hurricane early Wednesday. Prime Minister Gaston Brown described the island that is home to some 1,600 residents as barely habitable. The residents of the island were evacuated from the island at an estimated cost of $15 million. Brown said roads and telecommunications systems were destroyed and it will take months, if not years, to recover. The storm also claimed the life of Steve Jeremiah's 2-year-old son, who was swept to his death after the hurricane ripped the roof off her house and filled it with water. There was so much water beating past us. We had to crawl to get to safety. Crawl, she told the AP. I have never seen anything like this in my life, in all the years I experienced hurricanes. And I don't ever want to see something like this again. I have nothing, not even an ID to say my name. Nothing. House gone. The only thing you see is the foundation. U.S. Virgin Islands. At least 4 deaths were reported from the group of islands. On the island of St. Thomas, power lines and towers were toppled, leaves were stripped off plants and trees, a water and sewage treatment plant was heavily damaged, and the harbor was in ruins, along with hundreds of homes and dozens of businesses. On St. Thomas, resident Laura Strickling told the AP she and her family sheltered in their home for 12 hours as Irma clobbered the island. When the storm finally moved away, they emerged from their basement apartment and saw a largely unrecognizable landscape. There are no leaves. It is crazy. One of the things we loved about St. Thomas is that it was so green. And it's gone, Strickling said. It will take years for this community to get back on its feet. President Donald Trump approved a disaster declaration for the islands after Irma left severe damage. The declaration makes federal funding available for storm recovery on the islands of St. John and St. Thomas. Amid the calamity, the community has unified on Facebook and through other messaging apps to offer each other help and support. The community established for themselves a Google Doc entitled Wi-Fi for people to update information on if they and their neighbors are safe. In the days immediately after the storm, There was complete pandemonium as many locals were missing and family from abroad couldn't find their loved ones because of shoddy cell service and a scarcity of electricity. The communal dock helped locate hundreds of people. The community group boasts and comment updates on the post linking the document. Through the Facebook group, locals also started their own GoFundMe campaign to help rebuild the island, which has been devastated by the storm. The page was set up before President Trump approved the disaster declaration. British Virgin Islands. Devastation was widespread in the British Virgin Islands, but days after the storm passed, officials were still trying to get a full scope of the damage. According to the New York Times, those who were able to assess the damage to their homes and towns said the destruction was severe. "It is like an apocalyptic doomsday scene here," Catherine Clayton, who owns a hotel with her family on Tortola, told the Times. No trees, leaves or greenery. The storm descended on the British Virgin Islands Wednesday afternoon, with wind gusts measuring 110 miles per hour. The islands are home to more than 20,000 residents. The United Kingdom sent aid and troops, which arrived today to assist their overseas protectorate. Other hard-hit islands. Power outages and widespread destruction were also reported in Puerto Rico and Haiti, where the country's bean and corn crops, as well as pasture land, were wiped out by the heavy rain and flooding. One death was reported in Anguilla as the storm made 90% of the roads impassable, while catastrophic damage was reported in the islands of Turks and Caicos.